Good morning. This is your Harvard House Money Morsel. Like we always say, like and subscribe, then you will get an update on a weekly basis from what we're chatting about amongst ourselves on what moves the markets. So this morning I'm sitting with Michael Porter.
Morning,
Michael. Well, are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, Michael, we'll be off the economics for a little bit this time around. We had our elections, we formed this government of national unity, but all over the world we've told people there will be elections in all major countries. The last week or two we had two major economies in Europe going to the polls, in the UK and in France. And in France, at some stage, it looked like the far right might take the winning, and it would have been the first time since World War II that the right wing could have been in control, but they've got a different system of voting. And then in the UK, I think this, if my memory serves me right, it's the first time in history that the Conservatives has lost by so much. So some insights from you around those two economies and the elections?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? You actually probably should mention India as well, sort of 6 weeks ago, which also had a slightly different election outcome to what was predicted, And I think for me, really what the polls are showing is that people are dissatisfied with the status quo. They're looking for some change. So let's start with France, because that was an interesting one. And what really brought about France's election was they had elections for the European Parliament.
Yes.
And then Macron's party didn't do particularly well in that. And so he called a snap
election.
He called a snap election to try and bolster his support, which really backfired on him. And then, that just shows sometimes politicians don't always get it right. And the far right really looked set to dominate, which is quite concerning if you think where Europe is in the history. But then last night they had the second round of voting. And contrary to every expectation, the far right didn't get in, and it was the sort of more left-leaning party that actually got the majority vote. And I mean, there'll still be a coalition there. So, I think what I read from the French election is that when really push comes to shove, I'm not sure that populations are as far right as people think.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about. I'll come back to that. In the UK, I think what's really interesting in the UK is that the Labour didn't get a huge amount of new votes. It's just that the Conservatives lost so many votes. And if everything that I read and look back, I really think it's down to two things. I think the first, when they really started to lose support, was when it emerged that there'd been parties in Downing Street during lockdown. You impose all these laws on people, and it was draconian during COVID. If we remember, time fades, the memory fades a little bit. But, your politicians are telling you to do X, Y, Z and being pretty strict about it. And then they're having parties and not following. Exactly. And they lost a lot of trust and integrity in that. Liz Truss's government, which was she was the shortest prime minister in history, that didn't help. Yeah. And I think the Conservatives really have lost a lot of integrity and a lot of trust. And then there's this, I think across Europe, there's this massive issue around immigration, and it's a really difficult issue because Europe has actually got a declining population, so they need immigration to fuel the workforce and provide pensions for all the people that are getting old, but they don't want the immigration that they're getting, basically, to put it bluntly, and they're getting a lot of marginal people from the Middle East or refugees or whatever from the Middle East, and Europe the composition is changing, and those people don't have German or French or English values as those people think they should. They have their own values, and I think there's a lot of tension across Europe from those points of view. But from an economic point of view, I don't think in the UK much will change. I think in France there's a risk that this left-leaning government wants to turn on the taps, and France is already sort of skirting with the EU sort of constraints within the Euro sort of setup. So that's probably something to sort of watch, but it's better than the far right. So I think from an economic point of view, it's relatively business as normal. I think the pound might strengthen a little bit from the UK election, but I don't see massive amounts of economic change. But I think the winds of change are blowing through elections quite rapidly, and you obviously attention is going to shift to the US now. You know,
True. Yeah, they're coming up in November. So, yeah, Michael, as you say, I think what we're heading into is not so much uncertainty, but actually how governments are going to play out on policy. And yeah, who knows? Maybe those two economies or those two parliaments will come and knock on South Africa's door and ask, how does the government of national unity work? So let's hope and see. So.
I think what's interesting though, Billy, is that, you know, sitting down here, we can get quite critical and introspective of our own government, and we can slate our own politicians at the sleight of a hand. You know, if it wasn't for the Springboks winning, we'd have nothing to grow about. You know, but actually, you know, politics is in a pretty difficult place worldwide, and so, you know, I think we've got to celebrate down here. We've had a change of government. We've had no violence. We've formed a government of national unity in record time. In France, they might spend the next 4 months arguing about a government, a coalition government. You know, and so for all the heartache down here, I think just appreciate some of the challenges that have been overcome, and it's not all bad. I mean, I think, you know, sometimes we have to appreciate just how much has been achieved down here, but there's always room for improvement.
Thank you for watching. I think we're heading into a super cold season, so stock up on your winter woolies. Thank you.